Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on Trickplay thumbnails. My name is Jonathan Duvall, and I'm excited to be kicking off our new series of Roku developer webinars. Each month, we plan to cover a topic that should be useful for both new and experienced Roku developers. Subjects may range from integrations, tools, channel performance, and other tips and tricks to help making developing for the Roku platform easier. Today, Felix Mejia, Senior Partner Engineer here at Roku, is going to give you a deep dive on how to generate Trickplay thumbnails and implement them into your channel. So in just a few minutes, we're going to play a pre-recorded video where Felix explains what Trickplay thumbnails are and how they enhance the playback experience, the different Trickplay formats such as HLS and DASH, and integration steps, which vary slightly based on whether you're using Roku's native video player or your own custom player. Felix will then do a demo showing you how to create Trickplay thumbnails for the HLS and DASH streaming protocols and with Roku's BIFF format. When Felix is done, we're going to do a live Q&A session where Felix will be joined by the Trickplay engineering team here at Roku to answer your questions, which you can submit in Slido. The Slido link for this webinar is go.roku.com Trickplay-webinar-QA. The link to the Slido is in the webinar registration form, and it's also in the Zoom chat. Now, once you ask a question, your fellow attendees will upvote or downvote it, which will help determine whether it gets read on air. If your question is selected to be read on air, we'll ask you to use Zoom's built-in raise hand feature so I can unmute your audio, and then you can ask your question verbally to the team. Now, remember, when using this feature, be mindful that all attendees will be able to hear your question. And we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can. Also, be aware that during the webinar, we will not comment on our roadmap or make any other forward-facing commitments during the QA. That being said, we do welcome feature requests and other suggestions around what would make implementing Trickplay thumbnails easier for your channels. So also remember, if you have to leave early or you want to share this session later on, we will post a recording of this on the Roku Developers YouTube channel, the Roku Developers video portal, and the Roku Developers channel. So without further ado, let's get started.
Hi, my name is Felix Mejia. I'm a partner engineer here at Roku. I've been working here about 3 years, and you might have seen me from previous partner meetings, and if not, hello once again. And today I'm going to be talking about a bit about the Trickplay thumbnails implementation we have here at Roku. So today's agenda, I'm going to be going over what are Trickplay thumbnails in regards also to the certification requirement we have around it, what available formats we have here at Roku, and how to create and implement the use of these Trickplay thumbnails. Later on, we'll be going over through a demo, and then at the very end, we'll go through some Q&A. So what are Trickplay thumbnails? So these are essentially just images that capture the scene from when a user starts seeking a fast forward or a rewind throughout playback. It's a good user experience for the user to scrub through content and map out what position they're scrubbing through, while also indicating what the scene looks like to the position that they're scrubbing through. So it provides that visual feedback for when that user is fast forward or rewinding. So a little bit of terminology that we use before going into the details of how these thumbnails are displayed is that we defined a thumbnail as the actual individual image that you can see from here in this example, where it shows that particular scene. Now, the whole array or grid of thumbnails together we call a tile. So in this example, you can see that it's a 5x4 image mapping of all these thumbnails into one tile. So altogether, there'd be 20 thumbnails inside this tile. In regards to the certification requirement, it started being enforced in September 30th of 2020. And the requirement is that the thumbnails must be displayed during Trickplay for all VOD content that's longer than 15 minutes. So if you guys aren't implementing this requirement, you will be blocked for certification. We have the formats here available on Roku. We have a wide variety of different formats that we offer here. So recently, we added this new implementation that is based off the Dash standard and a new HLS standard that describes how to create or display thumbnails within the actual manifest of these streams. So the advantages here is that there's better support for the encoding and SSAI support in case if you're doing any sort of ad stitching for your content. And the majority of what this webinar will go over is this standard Dash and HLS thumbnails. However, alternatively, we do have our Roku proprietary BIFF format. And the advantage here is that say if you have a very small video catalog and you need to get through certification quickly and you don't want to bother with creating all these thumbnails, that it might take time to do. We have tools to alleviate that works just out of the box once those BIFFs are created and ingested into your channel, then they should just seamlessly work. The only disadvantage here is that there isn't support for the SSAI ads due to the way that it calculates, how those thumbnails are displayed without the ads being inserted prior to, when the ads are being inserted. There is also the option for the channel developer to implement the custom thumbnails themselves in a different manner that's not listed here. And there's no other restriction in regards to that. So as long as the thumbnails are being presented when the user starts scrubbing through playback, then that should be fine for certification. So a bit about how our video pipeline goes, or how to create these Trickplay thumbnails. So in your pipeline, you have your actual video source, and what you need to do is extract the thumbnails that you want to create the thumbnails that's in certain increments that they whatever that you're incrementing for the scrubbing to go through. So every 10 seconds you might want to create a thumbnail for that piece of content. And then once you have all these thumbnails generated, then you would need to create the tiles to stuff all of those thumbnails inside of. And depending on whether there's your channel is using Dash or HLS, then you would need to create the actual individual image manifests that go along with their particular standards and add them to the master manifest. So how to implement the Trickplay thumbnail. So if you have a scene graph channel that is using the HLS or Dash thumbnails implementation, and you're working with the native player UI, then there's very minimal work that needs to be done on the channel developer's part. Most of what happens is that the Roku OS will detect that there are image playlists that's presented inside of the master manifest, and it will the firmware will be able to detect those thumbnails and space them out so that when the user is scrubbing through content and based off of the manifest metadata, then it should be able to display those thumbnails seamlessly. So very little work has to be done on the channel developer for it to work with the native UI. However, for a implementation with the standard HLS and Dash thumbnails with a custom UI, there is a bit of more work that has to be done for displaying these thumbnails. One of them is essentially being able to retrieve those thumbnails in the first place. The channel developer would have to observe the video node's thumbnail tiles field, and every update that that field makes, the channel will need to get that metadata and data down to the channel, and that will include the URLs of all the individual tiles, the duration of those tiles that needs to be displayed for, and what configuration, if it's a 5x4 grid, 3x2 grid, something like that. That sort of metadata would be passed on through the thumbnail tiles field. During Trickplay, those if the user starts scrubbing through, the channel will need to be able to display those thumbnails and locate the actual thumbnail that needs to be displayed at that particular position, right? That the user needs, the user is seeking to. So there is a bit more work that has to be involved for getting the thumbnails to be displayed on a custom player UI, but overall, you have more control of how that's supposed to be displayed onto your channel. We do have some support pages here that will help you along with how to create these and implement the thumbnails. So we do have documentation on creating the thumbnails with HLS, DASH, and BIFF. We do have a couple sample channels that you could download, sideload into your own Rokus to test out, and it shows you essentially how to do it for both the standard and the custom UI implementations. And we do have links to our documentation and samples with the video on the Roku Developers YouTube channel and the Roku Developers doc portal. So you guys can take a look into that. And with that, I'm going to go over a bit of a demo to demonstrate how the thumbnails are going to be implemented. So welcome to the demo here. Here I'm going to be going over a bit on how to create these individual thumbnails for both HLS Dash and also for BIFF as well. So here I've actually downloaded from our Git repository what's the actual content that's that we're going to be working with. So I have it actually hosted in my local host. So if you actually go over here and you go local host, you can see that I have, kind of a bit of the samples that has been downloaded is the assets that, we're going to be working with. So I'm going to go first, and I'm going to work for working with the HLS version of this first. So give me a sec here. So I'm going to go into the README to kind of get a good idea of what I need to do prior to, creating these thumbnails. There are a couple of prerequisites that need to be installed prior to running the scripts to make those thumbnails. Here it needs FFmpeg and ImageMagick, so download those prior to running this sample. And since I have, there's going to be a script that's going to be run to alleviate most of the generation of the thumbnails, the tiles themselves, and also I'm going to be hosting this on my local host so that it could reach my Roku. So all that needs to be set up prior, and also here it kind of gives you a general idea of what goes on inside of this run scripts hls.sh file. So all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take this command, copy it, exit out of here, and then I'm going to paste it here. And what is essentially it's doing is that it is running this script file, this bash script, and it's referencing this master.m3u8 manifest, this HLS manifest, and it's going to create thumbnail tiles. Now here you could configure it however you decide to, create these thumbnails themselves, but I decided to make or keep this sample the way that it is, and go with a 320 by 180 individual thumbnail size. And the next parameters are going to be the configuration of how the grid for the tile is supposed to look like. So it's going to be a 5 by 4, and the increment of time that's that each thumbnail is going to be taken out from. So it's going to be for 10 seconds that I'm going to specify for. So all I'm going to do is just run this script, and it's going to take a little bit of time since it has to retrieve every single, it's looking through that piece of content and retrieving the thumbnails, generating the tile for it, and then finally just outputting. Oh, and at the very end, it's going to give you an entry to put into your master manifest to include, so that once the stream is played by the Roku, it's able to detect that that there's an image playlist present there. So you can see here that it says add to line to this master playlist. So I'm going to select this and copy it. And since I already have a master manifest that I'm just going copy over to master, we'll put demo.m3u8. Ahead of myself, I'm going to copy the master.m3u8, and I'm going to put it into this master demo. So let's open this guy up and see what it looks like. So you can see that it's essentially just like any old HLS manifest. So all I'm going to do is just plop this guy in of whatever the output was for that bash script, save it, and I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to be using our stream tester tool. Now, for newer developers, you might not know exactly what the stream tester tool does, but essentially this is a simple channel that most devs use to test out their individual streams on the Roku. You could visit our doc site that lists out where the developer tools are located in. And prior to this, we also would need to install the channel on the Roku that will be used to play out the stream that we specify here. So first, you would need to download it through this access code, and I've already done that. So all I need to do is just specify the stream URL. Oh, and I guess you would need to specify the device, but I've already specified it here. So here's that device. And I'm going to go into the stream URL, and I believe, or to go here, and yes, you can see that it's present here. So what I'm going to do is go HTTP 192.168.105. And all I'm doing is essentially just referencing the manifest that we just created with the thumbnails that I have hosted on my local host. Do keep in mind that when you're creating these thumbnails, these thumbnails would have to be hosted on wherever that you're hosting your video content, where that source is. So, and it has to be reachable through wherever that your users are getting that content from. So, so yeah, just a disclaimer there. So. HLS, and then I believe I called it master demo.m3u8. So master demo m3u8, that seems appropriate. Yeah. So what I'm gonna do is just hit play, and then we'll see from my Roku what happens. So it seems to be playing some content now, and it seems to be going fine. So what happens if I decide to press fast forward or rewind? So as you can see now, there are thumbnails being presented to the user as I'm like scrubbing forward and backwards from. So this is the actual individual tiles that that are retrieved from our where it's being hosted from, and the firmware is extracting those tiles and the thumbnails within those tiles to display to the user correctly and based off of a certain displacement within the position of the content, right, where I'm scrubbing through. So let's get out of here, and we'll go over a bit more about how to do this also for BIFF, but for now we're going to do the same thing but for the Dash version of this. So same idea. I'm just going to go see what's in here and read the README. There's some prerequisites and installation. There's FFmpeg and ImageMagick as well. There is an optional Python, version that I guess would need to be installed for running a different script. But right now, what I'm going to be looking for is this run scripts dash, and I'm going to copy this. And it's essentially the same script, except it's just for the Dash version. It's going to take the manifest that you specify here that we're making thumbnail tiles. And I'm going to say, I'm just going to go 320 by 180. Same thing as what we did beforehand. And I'm going to make it a 5x4 configuration, and it's going to go through 10-second increments of creating these thumbnails for. So I'm going to hit okay, and just let it run for a bit. Also keep in mind, you know, what you're essentially being hosted on these, you know, on the site that's giving out all these thumbnails for, you could check it yourself to verify that the thumbnails are present there. So in this example, so we got just done with creating the tiles for the Dash version. So I'm gonna go here, and if I wanted to and see if you know, there are thumbnails present there, I could just open wherever that those thumbnails were created in. So it was done in thumbnails underscore 320 by 180. If I open that, you see that there are tiles present, and if I open it, you can see that tiles are generated from running the script. So, you know, just to double check on that. So now we have the output for how to, you know, what to put into our master manifest with that includes the image playlist information that would need to be put into the master manifest. So I'm just going to copy this information, and then I'm going to make a copy of the master manifest, and we're going to call it master demo as well, except it's dash manifest. So, and then we're going to open this guy up, master. So nothing out of the ordinary here. I'm just going to plop this guy in with our information that dictates that this is where we're hosting our image manifest data in. So yeah, so essentially, you know, once that's done, you can just save it, and then let's go back into the stream tester tool, and then we're just going to replace, since I'm hosting it in a different directory, I'm just going to change a couple of things here. So it's going to be master demo, and then it's an MPD file. So, and I'm going to hit play, and then hopefully we'll see some thumbnails. So the content seems to be playing fine. And it's a little bit different, the video, than the last time, but you know, at least you could see kind of like what frames are being shown to the user and stuff like that. So say if I wanted to fast forward at this point, we would now see the thumbnails that we just generated using the Dash version of this. So, and once you hit play and you know, go into playback, you should be able to kind of correlate the scene that was made from the Trickplay to you know, the position that the users seek to. So that's how to do this with the Dash version as well, at least from a native, you know, player UI. Now we're going to go over a bit on how to do this, but say if, you know, you don't, you know, want to do this for, you know, using the HLS or Dash versions of this, but you want to do this for BIFFs per se, right? So do want to go over a bit on that. We have a BIFF tool that you can download off our developer docs. And I already have it here present, but essentially it's just these two executables, the BIFF tool and BIFF tool processor that it relies on. And I have a sample video that's, you know, that was taken to kind of demonstrate how the BIFF tool works and how simple it is. So we have our raw video.mp4 file, and say I want to run the BIFF tool on it, right? So let's do that, BIFF tool, and then video before. And then now it's going to be extracting those thumbnails from the video and create the tiles and make it into a proper BIFF format that we support, right? So just give it a second here. And once it's finally done with it, there's going to output, see here, a couple of different files. So there are options for you to specify if you wanted to use thumbnails for an HD, SD, or FHD resolution. So those options are available to, you know, once the BIFF tool finishes getting those BIFF file format from the video. So you can see it from here that it's in video FHD, video HD, and video SD.biff. So, and I'm going to be using a sample that I've also taken from the SDK docs to demonstrate how to utilize this with a native UI. So I've already downloaded it, so it's in simple video with BIFF. So it has, our normal scene graph, directory structure here. So let's take a look into what we need to edit. So, we have our manifest, all our good stuff, and then we have a simple video scene. And if we look inside this simple video scene.brs file, we do see a set content here. So what it does is essentially, creates a content node and then pass it into a video node for it to play the stream that we want it to. So I'm going to be changing the URL since we used a different, video for this. So I'm going to, point it to my local host. So I have it on 192.168.0.105. And we're doing this off the top directory structure. So I think it's video.mp4, if I believe that's correct. Yes, video. So it's going to be referencing that. And then inside the content node, you could actually reference what BIFF URL you're going to be referencing to for, for the BIFs to show up, for those thumbnails to show up for this piece of content. So I'm just going to copy this guy. And then remove that, just put that over. And I believe it was video.sd.biff. Double check video SD. Yes. So you can specify in the content node also if you want to use it for, or, in case if, for a different UI resolution that the Roku is displaying on, you could specify the URL for an SD BIFF URL, HD BIFF URL, or FHD as well. So we're just going to take this as well and specify for video.hd.biff. And let's say for funsies, we'll just copy this guy over and then do the FHD version of it. So FHD, FHD.biff. So simple enough. Now we're going to be taking this. We saved the file already. I just, hit Command S. And we're going to be sideloading this onto our Roku. So give me a sec. So this is a sample. And then I'm just going to zip this guy up. And we'll call it biff.zip, and then do components, images, manifest, source. So just taking all the contents and essentially just zipping it up. So there you go. And yeah, you can see it now, it's present. So we're going to be going into our application installer. For those that are new to Roku development, you just need to go into the IP of the Roku device itself. You would first of all, you would have to enable developer mode on the device, and then you'll get access to the development application installer for you to sideload channels into onto your Roku. So it's pretty simple. All you need to do is just hit upload, and we'll go to Trickplay demo with BIFF, and then we just created this, so it's the biff.zip. Install, and then we can see that. Obviously this, this UI was from the previous video. So, but essentially what the content is going to be playing is what we specified in the, that we newly saved onto, the sample here. So we're going to hit play. You can see content starts playing. And if I were to do, fast forward, then you can see some Trickplay thumbnails being generated. And these are the thumbnails that, we're referencing based off of, what we just created and hosted on our, on my local host. So, feel free to play around with it. But essentially, it's just going to be stay on top of those scenes that pop up within the thumbnail should match with, what's in the contents, depending on, some factors. There might be some offset, but, that's pretty normal. But yeah, that's essentially how you do it with BIFF. Now, if I wanted to do it with a custom implementation, we do have a sample that goes into how to create it. I'm just going to be going over a bit on how to kind of, see exactly what the main, things that are happening within the sample goes. So we're gonna download the standard HLS dash sample that we have hosted on our GitHub, and I already downloaded it here, for this sample. So we're just going to be opening this and see what happens. Okay, so in this sample, we actually would want to see inside the manifest first, because that's where we're going to be specifying what sample, what stream is going to be placed for the sample to play. So at the, it has some regular channel manifest, entries here, like title, subtitle, whatever. Here at the very bottom, we do have some entries for video stream format and video stream URL. And all it's doing within this custom channel is that it's extracting these values from the manifest, and it's putting them inside the video node. So since we already have a dash example, we're just going to be using that. So first of all, I'm going to be commenting this guy out. And oops. And then replacing it with the URL that we specified earlier in the Roku stream tester, because we know it works. And we're going to paste it here, and we'll save it. So now we're going to be sideloading this guy and see what happens. So I'm just going to zip this guy up, and we'll just call it test.zip. Components, images, manifest, and the source. Good, we zipped it up. Go back to our application installer, hit upload, since we're going to be doing a different example of the HLS dash version, and then here's our newly created test.zip. So let's replace it and see what happens. So you can see the details page, quote unquote, and then we're going to hit play and see what happens. So far so good. Seems fine. And then I'm going to hit fast forward and see what happens. So now we get thumbnails. Pretty cool, at least in my opinion. So yeah, that's all essentially done with a custom UI. This is the UI that we decided to mock up that is pretty similar to the native UI, but obviously the channel is the one creating this UI. So works pretty well in my opinion. Let's see what exactly is going on underneath the hood here. So let's take a brief look into how it all works. So go over a bit of, first of all, it creates the scene that it needs to work with, and it creates this ext video player UI object. And this object actually extends from a video node. So this actual component, the ext video player UI, is a video node that would need to observe its own thumbnail tiles field in order for it to get any sort of data from the thumbnails out. So if I were to go into ext video player, and you see here we have a check that if it's version over 9.4, then observe the thumbnail tiles field and call this init custom thumbnails. So what it's doing is that once the video starts playing a certain stream with the manifest that is being passed in, it's going to be calling this callback function init custom thumbnails. And if you look here, you see this init custom thumbnails callback, and what it's doing is it's getting all that custom thumbnail data out from the manifest itself. There is quite a bit of work that you're more than welcome to kind of look over and whatnot, but you could to get a good sense of what is actually being returned from the thumbnails, let's rerun this sample, but instead we're going to be looking at the telnet data, at least when it's sideloaded. So I'll make this telnet into the actual Roku device, so 198.168.0.110, at least that's the IP that I have it, and we're going to go into 8085. So you can see a particular output that's being outputted because of the fact that we have the thumbnail debug. Oh, that's also a flag that we enabled here, at least from the manifest, is some static variable that we call the thumbnail debug, and it prints out some output. So that's what it's essentially doing here. But what we're interested in is what exactly is the data that's being retrieved from the manifest through BrightScript / scene graph. So if I were to play the video without doing anything else, then you would see that this is what's being outputted, right? So this particular entry it's reading from the manifest comes from the manifest, right? So if we were to go back into this guy, you would see that the ID reflected here also reflects on this thumbnail entry that we're printing out because of the fact that it's reading it off of the manifest. And you would see a bit of metadata that's being returned by through scene graph from the firmware is that the bandwidth, the duration of the actual thumbnails, each individual tile, I mean, and a final time indicating how far that the thumbnails will go to reflective based off of the discontinuities if there are any, the height, the width as well of each individual thumbnail, and the configuration of horizontal and vertical tiles. The actual tile data is inside here, which unfortunately this doesn't print out, but essentially this will just indicate the URLs of the tiles that the channel would need to work with in order for it to work. But essentially that would be it. That's most of what's this sample would be working with, is that whatever output that's being done with this, it's working around it so that it's able to display these thumbnails. Yeah, and that concludes the demo portion here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm gonna hand it over to Jonathan.
Cool. Thanks so much, Felix. That was great. So we're gonna get started here with our Q&A in about 1 second. So let's go. The first question from George. Do you have advice for strategies to have thumbnails ready when the UI is not being displayed, but not making the system do too much? So I think George wants to make the thumbnails ready when the UI appears, but doesn't want to waste resources when the UI is hidden.
Yeah, I think at least in the sample, what we end up doing is saving off those thumbnail tile data. I believe it's just in M, I believe, in the sample. And then whenever the user decides to actually do the Trickplay itself, it does the calculations of how to render that right then and there, instead of having to prepare these tiles prior to when the UI is doing it. So I don't have much more advice other than the fact that you probably would want to save off those thumbnail tile data. Just keep in mind as well is that at least, I can't remember in the HLS case, but in the Dash case, if it has different periods with different thumbnail tile data, that thumbnail tile data field will update depending on how many periods you have. So you might be able to save off that data and then append more data based off of what it gets updated from.
Cool. And I can speak to that from the internal implementation as well. So it's similar to what Felix was saying, is that just the URLs are essentially processed at the beginning of time. So it's extracted from the manifest and passed through to the implementation. So one of the strategies could be if the content has fewer URLs, in other words, the tiles have more thumbnails within them. So that would be take a little bit less processing up front, but as Felix said, the actual image processing of downloading the image data and displaying them won't happen until the Trickplay is pulled up.
All right, let us move on to the next question. George asks, is there a secret API to get one thumbnail image instead of us processing the tiles?
Currently, we do not. As long as whatever that's being downloaded from the thumbnail tile data, which I would assume would be however you generated those thumbnail tiles, it could be 1x1, which we don't recommend, tile set, or it could be a 5x4 thumbnail tile data, that would just be returned as one poster on the bright script level.
Excellent. Okay, the last of the George questions. Is it true we can call the video node BIFF display.get nearest frame method and then observe the BIFF display nearest frame for HLS2? I was just told that's the case.
I actually haven't tried this on, say, the HLS and DASH portions. Correct me if I'm wrong, Trent, but I think those are two separate mechanisms that are being used for how to get like BIFFs versus how to get them from like the thumbnail tile data.
Yeah, I would have to check on that. They do, the internal implementation is a sort of, abstract base class base. So it's possible that this information gets filled, but I'd have to double check on that.
Okay. So yeah, once we double check that, we can provide that information to you, George. All right. Felipe, is there a trick to show / control BIFF display on top of a custom UI?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I want to say I probably need to review this because I actually don't use a whole lot the BIFF display myself. But I would assume just calling the APIs that we have for BIFF would be sufficient for getting at least the recommended post, or like the poster that gets returned from firmware. And it would just be, however the developer decides to display this on screen.
Cool. All right. Hey guys, so we're getting down to the last question. So please, we definitely have more time to answer more questions. So if you have additional questions, please enter them in the Slido. Let's take advantage of the time that we have. So Arturo asks, what scene graph component do you recommend to implement a custom thumbnail list UI that will allow us to show a potentially huge list of images without affecting channel performance?
I guess depending on how you're implementing, say, the custom thumbnail UI, at least in the sample, we have, I believe it was 5 posters that are loaded up in a group. And all it's doing for when it's trying to scrub through is just updating the URLs for those. So, and presumably you want to do this while the video is paused as well, considering that it's also taking up, CPU cycles, and it would affect performance when it tries to transition from one poster to the other. So yeah, I think it's just essentially depending on how you're implementing these thumbnail tiles. And also keep in mind, we probably want to recommend that, you're not taking up a huge amount of thumbnail tile data beforehand to load up posters maybe that are off screen or something like that. Because yeah, that essentially the firmware will still try to, render those, and it might affect performance on what is actually visible for on screen. So yeah, I think that's probably my answer for that.
Okay, awesome. So I'm just gonna say this is the last call for questions. So I'll give you guys like 1 more minute. If there's anything else you guys want, or if any guys on the team have anything you guys want to chip in or anything, or general statements in the realm of thumbnails. Okay. So if that is it, let me stop sharing the Slido. And so first of all, thank you so much to our team for answering the questions, and thank you everyone for attending today. This is a really good, informative webinar. And also just to let you guys know, this is the first of what we plan on doing as monthly webinars. The next one that we plan on doing will be in the middle of June on Roku Pay purchase debugging. That came from a suggestion from George. So keep in mind also, we got a last second question. that came in from Aaron Spelling. I'm not sure it's the same Aaron Spelling of Melrose Place, Beverly Hills 90210. So let me go ahead and reshare the Slido so everyone can see the question. One second, I need to. And let's. Well, here we go. Someone asked the big question that we need to talk about. I'm glad actually this came in. So I saw about 2 weeks ago that somewhere that will need the same BIFF Trickplay files for live streams. Is that correct? And if so, how would that go? And so I think generally I'll just take the first thing about the Trickplay for live streams, that this is something that is currently not supported in the firmware. We're working on trying to get this feature in a future release. But if you guys want to, like, I guess we'll let the team talk about this, but if you do have a video stream that you're looking to see whether it works in as far as in a live stream environment, that's something maybe you could provide to us and we could test with it, but I'll let the team talk to it about that.
Yeah, this is a feature under development, and it's certainly something that we're interested in having more test content for. So yeah, I'd like to second that. And we could potentially set you up to also be able to test this in your environment, just working together with you. So please contact us if you want to do that.
Yep. I would say just feel free to use like the you can ping me on the Roku developers Slack to get started. If you've got something we want to work with us on testing, that'd be a good way to get started, and we can funnel that to the team. So that's a great question. Thanks, Aaron.
But I could just bring up in a general sense, it's very similar for live streams. It's just that those get updated over time from the manifest.
Okay. All right. So like I said, all right, thanks everyone. Hey, and if you guys want to watch a replay of this, or you want to share this webinar with your teammates, as a reminder, this will be posted on the Roku developer site, our YouTube channel, and the on-device channel within the next few days. And then keep an eye on the Roku developers blog for announcements on dates of our future webinars. Like I said, the plan for mid-June is Roku Pay purchase debugging. If you guys have ideas for other webinars, I believe there's a thread in the announcement section in the Roku developer Slack. Feel free to just put your idea in that thread, and people can upvote it, and that will kind of help dictate the our agenda for future webinars. So it's not, we want the community to help contribute to those ideas of what topics you guys want covered. That's, our goal is to obviously help you guys make development as easier and streamlined as possible on the Roku platform. So we appreciate your contributions, your ideas, and as you can see, we're taking that feedback and incorporating that. So please, give us those ideas for the webinars, and you may see your idea actually be implemented in a future webinar. All right, thanks everyone. You guys have a great Monday. Thank you so much for attending. Have a great day and happy streaming.